What sort of cooperation do you see in the defense front?
Well, I think India wants to be able to purchase some of the more advanced items that are produced in the United States in addition to India, but I think India will always have a diversified procurement strategy. I expect there are things that we will want to buy from India's defense industry as the defense industry matures, and Indians clearly are very talented in information technology, etc. So I expect some of these defense things will be a two-way street. But I'm also hoping that on the U.S. side, we will spend less on defense procurement. I think that we should really rethink what is it that we need. We're so proud of having this exceptionally advanced military, but I think we're in a transition to realizing that the scenarios of the kind of big wars that the United States might fight are not the most likely scenarios. And so we really have to just pause and rethink what is the kind of equipment and machinery that our military needs. We have to prepare ourselves for, very different. If we look at Afghanistan, Iraq, recent deployments, the requirements there were not for advanced fighter jets and not for, the highest technology items, but for very basic things. I mean, in Afghanistan, we had soldiers on horseback. So not that Afghanistan will be repeated necessarily, but I personally would like us to scale back a little bit on the defense procurement side.
Well, there was a view, I don't know how far it is correct, that the Strategic Defense Initiative during the Reagan administration was what actually burst the Soviet Union. That they could not, that the Soviets realized that they cannot match American defenses, and they had bankrupted themselves by trying to match the Americans arm for arm and military might for military might. So is it possible that actually investments made in military technology actually help to deter and to in some extent actually shape the competition to keep the peace, so to say, maintain peace in the world?
Well, I do think that the Soviets were very concerned about keeping up with us, but remember, in the early part of the Cold War, we were the ones who were chasing them. We thought that they were ahead of us. Certainly their first, the Sputnik, launch into space stimulated President Kennedy to launch a more accelerated space program for the United States. So we really were peer adversaries in terms of military capability. The Soviets were very advanced and very sophisticated, and I think there were other things that were going wrong in their economy. They were not generating enough economic activity so that it was hard to afford. I personally think that what brought down the Soviet Union was, printing presses and paper to the Solidarity movement in Poland and shoulder-held missiles to Afghanistan that helped the Mujahideen defeat the Soviets. So if you really look at the end of the Soviet period, very low technology investments in Poland and in Afghanistan were just as important as military competition.
Right. Given the fact that America is one of the main consumption centers of the world, American consumption really drives the world economy. How do you foresee in the next 2 to 3 years, given the lessons that we've learned from this round of economic crisis, what sort of consumption patterns will be there in the US? And how will it actually drive the economy 3 years from here?
Well, that I can't predict big changes. I do know that as a result of the financial crisis, there's at a fairly superficial level in urban, prosperous America, there is a slight shift by some degrees in consumption patterns. People are getting more sensitive about, how much energy we waste. There's less flaunting of luxury goods. People want to, stores describe where Americans used to want to buy multiple items of the same genre. Now they'll say, I just need one, I don't need so many. So generally we're in a mood of some more modest consumption. At least those are people that have a lot of disposable income. But we have unemployment, we have people who are living in much more acute economic circumstances, so it's hard to generalize these patterns. But one of the things that has been discussed at this conference is that actually the domestic market in both China and India is so large and so robust that those countries, that these two big rising economies may actually be less dependent on the U.S. market as the target of their of their exports than before.
Right, and finally, because energy and infrastructure plays a key role, not only in this conference, in the subject of discussion here, we wanted to know what are America's emerging views on energy security, how to secure energy supplies, how to use energy, and
well, there's what I find a very unappealing and unattractive part of our political discourse is to say that we want to reduce our dependence on Arab oil. The assumption being that, the Arabs are perhaps unreliable as trading partners. I find all of that very unpleasant because I, first of all, don't think that structurally any of us can completely reduce our dependence on petroleum products. I think that they are not replaceable, even if we were to make huge investments in solar energy, wind technology, other renewables. I think there's certainly the transportation sector will continue to rely on fossil fuels and oil. So first, I think it's not technically correct, and I think it's politically a little bit insulting to say that we don't want oil because of the countries in which it's produced. It's a world oil market. We get oil from Canada, from Mexico, from the United Kingdom. We produce some of it ourselves. It's sort of silly to make this an Arab issue because I don't think it is about the Arabs. But energy security is about relying less on the international sources of energy, looking more smartly at conservation at home and at new forms of production at home. And certainly President Obama has already tried to steer us in the direction of new green technologies. And I think we will lag behind because I think we've created so much protection for the traditional big oil companies that we have kind of legal incentives that favor them over other kinds of energy. We've got to open up and create new economic incentives for people to develop these alternative energies. And there's still a debate about whether they can be brought to scale, whether they have to serve very local markets. But I do think that that's how we think about energy security right now.